In a world where the ink of perception often blots the pages of truth, one leader stood at the crossroads of adulation and vilification. Was Muammar Gaddafi truly the tyrant the West portrayed? Or was there a grander play of shadows and propaganda at work? Dive deep with us as we unravel the mystery. Gaddafi's Libya, the paradox of prosperity and power. At Libya's helm, Muammar Gaddafi presided over a land that stood out in North Africa. Thanks to its rich oil reserves, Libya boasted a higher standard of living compared to its neighbors. Free healthcare, subsidized necessities, and robust education systems were the order of the day. But this prosperity had another side. Gaddafi's vision of a Jamahiriya, or state of the masses, often masked an authoritarian grip. The economic and political spheres were tightly controlled. Positions of power were commonly occupied by Gaddafi's close allies, ensuring an unwavering loyalty with him at the epicenter. The dawn of the 2000s marked a change. Gaddafi, once the West's adversary, sought rapprochement. Weapons programs were dismantled, and international oil companies found their way back to Libyan sands. The leader, once a global pariah, was now courting and being courted by the West. The beginning of the conflict, a spark in the Arab Spring's blaze. In 2011, a wave of rebellions known as the Arab Spring swept across the Middle East and North Africa. The uprisings, sparked by a deep desire for political change, toppled regimes and gave hope to those yearning for freedom. In this climate, Libyans eyed their own authoritarian leader, Muammar Gaddafi, with renewed audacity. What had seemed implausible for decades was suddenly within the realm of possibility. The end of Gaddafi's rule. The first embers of this national reckoning ignited in Benghazi. Spurred by the arrest of human rights activist Fathi Terbil, protesters took to the streets. What began as calls for justice and reform rapidly escalated into a demand for Gaddafi's ouster. But Libya's unrest was not just a local phenomenon. It was stoked by external players. Qatar, a small Gulf state with outsized influence, took a keen interest in shaping Libya's narrative. From backing anti-Gaddafi TV stations to providing arms to rebels, Qatar was far from a passive observer. Their involvement fueled not just the rebellion, but also the wider perception of it. Media's role in shaping the Libyan narrative, a web of truth and exaggeration. When the embers of rebellion sparked in Libya, international media networks became awash with stories of Gaddafi's fierce crackdown. Leading the media charge was Qatar, with its influential news outlet, Al Jazeera. Their portrayal predominantly highlighted Gaddafi's regime as one ruthlessly suppressing peaceful demonstrators. This narrative, while containing threads of truth, painted a predominantly one-dimensional picture of Gaddafi as a merciless tyrant. Several claims took center stage, further cementing Gaddafi's image as the villain of this unfolding drama. Airstrikes on civilians. Reports flooded in about Gaddafi's air force indiscriminately targeting civilians. However, conclusive evidence for these claims remained elusive. Use of mercenaries. Rumors swirled about African mercenaries bolstering Gaddafi's forces. These stories, often based on racial prejudices, were later debunked by various investigations. Widespread rape allegations. Perhaps the most damning were tales of Gaddafi issuing Viagra to his troops, encouraging mass rapes. Yet, despite their frequent repetition, these stories lacked concrete backing, and some human rights organizations raised doubts about their veracity. The situation begged the question, were we witnessing a dictator's true narrative, or was it a media construct, potentially magnified by geopolitical interests? While Gaddafi's reign was far from spotless, one must ponder how much of what we knew was truth and how much was carefully crafted propaganda. Western interest in Libya, energy, economics, and hidden agendas. As soon as dissent began to ripple across Libya, Western powers, notably France and Britain, were swift to voice their support for the rebels. On the surface, it was framed as a noble cause, aiding a suppressed populace against an oppressive regime. However, the speed and intensity of their endorsement beckoned a deeper examination of their true interests in Libya. Libya, with its vast oil reserves, was a beacon for energy-hungry economies. France, ever keen on reducing its energy dependency, particularly from Russia, saw an opportunity in the Libyan uprising. Oil diplomacy. Rumors swirled about France's ambition to secure a lion's share of Libyan oil post-Gaddafi. Supporting the rebels might pave the way for favorable oil contracts, ensuring a steady flow of Libyan black gold into French refineries. The gas equation. Besides oil, the prospect of tapping into Libya's natural gas reserves appealed to Western powers. With European nations perpetually keen on diluting Russia's influence as a dominant gas supplier, Libyan gas presented a tantalizing alternative. Gaddafi, in his final years, wasn't just a thorn for the West due to his governance style. He was charting an audacious economic course that rang alarm bells in Western capitals. Alternative currency ploy. Gaddafi's vision to introduce a gold-backed currency as an alternative to the American dollar, especially for oil transactions, threatened the hegemony of the West's financial system. Implications for the African franc. More direct to France's interests was the potential impact of Gaddafi's currency on the African franc. A gold-based currency could destabilize the franc's stronghold in many African nations, unsettling France's economic influence in the region. The end of Gaddafi. The fall of an era and the rush for riches. As the Libyan conflict intensified, a formidable alliance began to shape against Gaddafi. NATO forces, spearheaded by the United States alongside Arab allies, started to coalesce. Their combined military prowess significantly tilted the balance against Gaddafi. Officially, the goal was to protect the Libyan civilians. But as the noose tightened, it became clear that Gaddafi's rule was nearing its fateful end. The eventual capture of Gaddafi was as chaotic as it was brutal. His final moments, far from the grandeur he was accustomed to, were stark and gruesome. Caught in Sirte, his hometown, he faced an enraged mob, perhaps an embodiment of the collective anger and despair of a nation yearning for change. The world watched, many in shock, as the once mighty leader was subjected to grim treatment, eventually meeting his end in a manner unbefitting any human, let alone a long-standing head of state. The aftermath, a nation's power vacuum and the global scramble. With Gaddafi gone, Libya was poised on the edge of a precipice. The vacuum left in his wake was profound. Libya, once a stable albeit oppressive state, now teetered on the brink of fragmentation. Various factions, tribes, and militias, once united in their opposition against Gaddafi, now found themselves at odds, each seeking to assert dominance. However, it wasn't just internal dynamics that defined post-Gaddafi Libya. The global powers, ever watchful, saw an opportunity amidst the chaos. The rush for Libya's rich resources, primarily its vast oil reserves, began in earnest. Nations, under the guise of reconstruction aid and support, maneuvered to secure their slice of the Libyan pie, keen on leveraging the nation's economic potential for their gain. So was Gaddafi purely a tyrant or a casualty of external interests and media distortions? The aftermath of his fall sees Libya oscillating between hope and chaos, while external powers eye its resources. It's essential to question and seek truth in our global narratives. Always read between the lines.